I call it too friendly, too fast. So from the first perspective it's concerns yourself, you acting too friendly, too fast. All right, so whenever you show up in a new prison, whenever you self-surrender, whenever you get transferred to a new facility, when you go in, be polite. You can introduce yourself to your cellie, anybody that comes up and wants to talk to you, but be reserved. There's a lot of guys, like one guy stands out in my mind when I first landed at Leavenworth. Me and him got off the same bus, and they put us in the same cell block together, and I was just watching this guy, and he was just running around. I saw him talking to everybody, slapping backs. He looked like, the guy running for mayor or something. The guy that was my cellie, I pulled him up. I was like, hey, was this guy here before? Because he just seemed like he knew everybody in the block, and it made me think that maybe he was back on a probation violation or something, and he'd been there before, and he just knew all these guys. And my cellie was like, no, I've never seen him before. So I even later on, when the guy came up and asked me how I was doing, how I was settling in, because like I said, we came to that prison together. I asked him, I was like, have you been here before or something? You back on a violation? The guy's like, no, this is my first time here, just like you. And it set off like alarm bells in my head, because this is a big warning sign. A lot of guys will come in and they'll be real friendly like this, and it's usually a sign of guys that like to run up debts. And what they'll do is they'll find all the storemen, the guys that loan out stamps or commissary for credit, so these guys, these too friendly, too fast guys, and when they first come in, a lot of them are like drug addicts. So they'll come in and they'll be fiending because they've either been in transit or whatever. They've been in the hole somewhere else. They've finally been let out. A lot of times if you go to the hole, if you've checked in or gotten some trouble at another compound, you might be in the hole 9 months before you actually make it to another prison. So these drug addicts have it's like Christmas Day for them. They hit a new compound and they can't wait to get high again. So they get there and they don't have any money or anything. So they just find anybody that'll loan them something. Hey man, can I borrow this or whatever? And I'll pay you whenever we go to the store. And they'll just run up these huge debts, and they just get themselves right back in the bind. And a lot of time these guys will check in. And what I mean by that is they'll run up a debt that they can't pay. And when the bill comes due, they'll go to a staff member and request protective custody and say, hey, look, I owe these guys money. If you don't put me in the hole and, protect me, that they're going to hurt me. And so that happens a lot. And it's guys that have been down a while, they recognize too friendly, too fast as a warning sign with that. It's not always the case. There's a lot of friendly people in prison, but it's not a characteristic of an old school convict. If you want people to if you want to make the right first impression, you got to understand prisoners are some of the most unforgiving people you ever meet. They're constantly bombarded with fresh faces. Every week, every other week, a bus comes in with bringing new people in. And inmates are looking for a reason to dismiss you. They assume the absolute worst about you until you prove yourself otherwise. If you're a white guy landing at a low, they're going to assume maybe that you're either a rat, you're a child molester. They'll assume the absolute worst about you until you prove otherwise. And so the best way to land on a yard and go about setting the right impression is to be reserved, to be polite. And because another thing about too friendly, too fast, it's you're giving off this aura of being desperate, to make friends and that type of thing. An old school convict that's been around, when he lands on a yard, because he's been on many yards, he knows that the people that usually approach you first when you hit a yard are the worst people at that compound, because they've been there for a while and nobody at the prison likes them. So every time a new bus comes in, those guys go and try to find a new batch of friends that don't know anything about them. And it's like, so they'll come and approach you and whatnot. And, within a week or two, you'll realize what assholes they are, and you'll move on to greener pastures. So the point that I'm trying to make here is that when you hit a yard and you're like buddy with everybody that'll talk to you and just going around trying to meet everybody your first few minutes there, it sets off a lot of warning signs, like you don't know any better, or maybe you're desperate for friendship or something like that. Like an old school con will kind of like just sit back, demonstrate he knows how to do time, demonstrate that he's fine being alone, and basically you're setting the aura that, hey, I'm cool, I'm out of the way, and if you want to hang out with me, you need to prove yourself to me. And this isn't about like a popularity contest or becoming the new cool guy on the block. What it's about is using every opportunity to not put a target on your back, to set the right image with other people, and to use these prison etiquette rules to create a space between yourself and other inmates.